His eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that sent shive rs down my spine. It wasn't shock that filled his gaze, but a simmering curiosity, like he had stumbled upon a forbidden secret and couldn't tear himself away. He couldn't look away, couldn't stop watching. Our eyes held each other, and in that moment, the air between us wasn't just heavy, it crackled with electricity. There was no shame, only an undeniable, primal magnetism. I could see in his eyes that he was imagining much more than just water caressing my skin. My name is Serafina, and at 45, I never imagined I would be living such a solitary life. My small house by the lake, once filled with laughter and happiness, now holds only silence since my husband passed away 7 years ago. Each day passes in a long string of memories and loneliness. The old house still stands strong, but the walls seem to echo with the ghosts of the past, reminding me of days long gone. I often spend my time tending to the small garden, talking to the rose bushes as if they could respond. Sometimes, I sit for hours on the rocking chair on the front porch, listening to the wind whispering through the trees and watching the sunlight dance on the surface of the lake. My life is quiet, yet deep down, I feel a constant void, a yearning for connection, for a new joy. Then one day, Jack, my 28-year-old nephew, decided to visit. Jack, the son of my sister, and I hadn't seen each other in a long time. When he stepped through the door, carrying his fishing gear and flashing a bright smile, I felt a shift. The atmosphere in the house, once dull and somber, suddenly became vibrant, filled with an energy I hadn't felt in years. We decided to spend the entire day on the small boat in the middle of the lake. The sun warmed our skin, the water gently lapped against the sides of the boat, and Jack's laughter chased away the lingering shadows in my heart. The jokes, the shared moments of peace between us, were both comforting and unfamiliar. Jack, with his strong hands casting the fishing line, had grown into a man. His body, solid and well-toned, had been shaped by years of outdoor work. I couldn't help but notice how his wet shirt clung to his frame each time he cast the line. We talked about life, love, and the unexpected turns of fate. I shared stories of my youth, the wild adventures in New Orleans, and he listened intently. His eyes reflected not just curiosity but something deeper, something that made my heart race. "Serafina, this is how you've lived." Jack spoke, his voice a blend of respect and something else, something I hesitated to name at first, but it made my heart race. As the day faded into evening, the sky painted in soft hues of orange and pink, we found ourselves sitting closer than before. Each accidental brush of our bodies sent a shiver down my spine, a sweet current that ignited a fire deep within me, a fire I thought had long since been extinguished. I couldn't help but wonder if this was merely the thrill of being near youth, or if there was a deeper attraction pulling us together. My thoughts swirled with conflicted emotions, and my voice dropped to a husky whisper as I asked, "Have you ever felt drawn to someone you know you shouldn't be?" The question lingered in the humid air, like the Spanish moss draping softly from the trees above us, adding an air of mystery and allure. Jack turned to me, his eyes searching mine, not just curious but filled with something deeper, something I couldn't quite place. "I have," he murmured, his words simple yet charged with meaning, confirming the unspoken tension between us. His voice carried a subtle promise, an unspoken understanding of shared secrets and hidden desires. As we gathered our things, his hand brushed against mine, lingering there just a moment longer than necessary. That touch, though small, felt like the prelude to something far more intimate. I found myself anticipating his next move, my heart pounding, my body responding to his proximity in a way it hadn't for anyone in years. When we returned home, the silence between us was no longer empty, it was filled with unspoken questions and a palpable desire. The air seemed thicker, every moment charged with a sweet tension, waiting for something to happen, something that could no longer be denied. I caught him looking at me, not as an ant, but as a woman. His gaze was different, as if he were seeing me for the first time, or perhaps, looking at me in a way he knew he shouldn't. It was unsettling, yet strangely intoxicating. I couldn't shake the thought that sometimes, the heart craves what it shouldn't. That night, as I lay in bed, the memory of his touch, his eyes, haunted me. A sharp, pulsing ache spread through me, a hunger for something beyond the familiar ache of loneliness. The question lingered, pulsing in my mind, should I explore this forbidden attraction? After a day spent in the humid air of New Orleans, the night stretched on, thick with unspoken promises. The atmosphere was heavy, saturated with the words we hadn't said, the things we hadn't allowed ourselves to explore. I decided to surrender to my loneliness, slipping into the solitude of a hot bath, allowing the warm water to soothe the fiery tension rising within me. The night was eerily quiet, the only sounds the distant murmur of the city and the steady beat of my own heart, echoing the forbidden thoughts swirling in my mind. I sank deeper into the warmth of the bath, the heat enveloping me, like the touch of a lover's hands. My body responded to the embrace, feeling the water slide over my skin, easing away the tension, yet intensifying the ache that lingered. My thoughts drifted to Charles, my nephew. His youth, his presence, stirred something deep inside me. There was an energy to him, a spark that ignited something within me, something I hadn't expected, yet couldn't ignore. I hadn't felt this in years, the stillness of the night, and the solitude that surrounded me, or so I thought. The steam swirling around me as I drifted deeper into my own thoughts, I allowed my hands to roam freely, caressing my body with a slow, deliberate touch. My fingers traced paths I knew well, each stroke igniting a rush of warmth and excitement, awakening a desire that had long been dormant. The darkness cocooned me, amplifying every sensation, every spark of pleasure that grew within me. The water, warm and soothing, kissed my skin in rhythm with the subtle movements of my body, each wave of heat matching the pulse of my growing hunger. But then, something shifted, a sudden chill ran through me, as if an invisible presence had settled near. A shiver of awareness pierced my thoughts, and I felt it, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. My heart raced, my breath quickened, and in that moment of realization, I froze. And there he was. Jack stood in the doorway, bathed in the soft, silvery light of the moon. His gaze was unwavering, locking onto mine with an intensity that sent a rush of warmth through me. It wasn't shock in his eyes, but something deeper, an unspoken curiosity that stirred something inside me. It was as if he had glimpsed something he shouldn't have, yet couldn't look away from. My heart beat faster as I realized that his eyes weren't just studying me, they were drinking me in, exploring, searching for answers. I felt a heat spread across my skin, a mix of anticipation and vulnerability, as our gazes locked. The air between us seemed to thicken, charged with an invisible current. I couldn't look away either. His presence was overwhelming, and the way he watched me, intimately, carefully, made me feel exposed yet strangely alive. My thoughts raced, torn between wanting to push him away and wanting him closer, wanting to feel the intensity of his gaze, the weight of his attention. The room seemed to close in around us, the quiet of the night amplifying the thrum of my pulse. It wasn't just his eyes that made me feel this way, it was everything, the rawness of the moment, the silent invitation that lingered in the space between us. I could have told him to leave, could have broken the tension with a single word, but I didn't. I didn't want to. Instead, I found myself drawn to him, my breath catching as I leaned slightly forward, silently urging him to cross the threshold into this moment. The temptation was overwhelming, and despite the part of me that hesitated, I knew, deep down, I wanted this, wanted to feel his presence, wanted to feel seen in a way I hadn't in so long. In that moment, I realized there was no turning back. I could see the hunger in his eyes, the unspoken desire, and the connection between us crackled with something undeniable. My chest tightened, and as he took a step closer, I knew this was a moment I wouldn't be able to forget. The shadows wrapped around us, but his gaze never wavered, and I felt myself unravel, just slightly, just enough to let him see the parts of me I'd kept hidden for far too long. Now I am no longer his relative but just a simple woman with her simple emotions. Emotions that I have buried for so long and never thought that there would be a time when they would rise up so strongly. But to Jack, it seemed that the fragile boundary made him sigh heavily and turn away. In his eyes was something intense, strong but also confused and awkward. The water in the bathtub made my body hot and itchy. If I had invited him in at that time, it would have become something more than this. I wonder if you have ever been in my situation at that moment. The air was filled with the conflict between desire and duty. I lay in the warm water but could not escape his eyes swept over me with the desire of a man. Stepping out of the bath, my heart still beat fast when thinking about his eyes. I felt like I had returned to the emotions of a girl over 20 with the strong vibrations of the first time. Our dinner took place in silence. It seemed that each of us was wandering with our own thoughts. The whole room only had the sound of knives and forks clinking on the plate, but the air carried a strange weight. We no longer looked into each other's eyes to chat happily but instead had confused and evasive looks. It seemed that he had the same thoughts as me. The hesitation to step over the boundary but not yet had the courage. The next morning, when Jack caught me soaking in the hot tub, the air in the house felt heavy, charged with a tension that was equal parts desire and danger. I woke up knowing one thing for certain: last night could not simply be left behind. I chose my outfit with deliberate care, a dress that clung to every curve, whispering of untamed nights from my youth, a stark rebellion against the quiet monotony of widowhood. It was daring, audacious even, and I felt it the moment Jack walked in. His eyes widened, the look from the night before returning with a vengeance. But this time, it wasn't curiosity, it was raw, primal, and unmistakable. "You look incredible," he said, his voice low and rough, each word dripping with meaning. A heat surged through me, not just from his words but from the way he looked at me, as though seeing me not as a relative, but as a woman who could stir something deep within him. The day unfolded like a game we were both too enthralled to stop playing. Every touch was measured, calculated, every glance carried a weight that hung in the air between us. When I handed him a cup of coffee, I let my fingers linger on his just a moment longer than necessary. He responded in kind, his hand brushing the small of my back as he passed, leaving a trail of warmth that seemed to set my skin alight. Have you ever felt that unbearable heat from a fleeting touch, one that promises something forbidden, something irresistible? Every accidental brush of lips felt like the ignition of a spark, a silent invitation to step over a line neither of us dared name but both were powerless to deny. If you've ever experienced that feeling, share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your story. Don't forget to hit the like button to show your support and help us reach more people who might connect with these moments. Also, be sure to follow our channel so you won't miss any of the captivating, emotional, and exciting stories we have coming your way. Your support means the world to us and inspires us to keep creating even better content. I often feel Jack's gaze silently tracing over my body, like a soft breeze that's both gentle and scorching. His eyes linger on my legs, slowly, appreciatively, or they catch the sunlight dancing in my hair. In those moments, I can't help but offer him a mischievous smile, letting him know that I recognize the unspoken game between us. And more than that, I'm enjoying every second of it, the thrill, the anticipation, the danger. The boundaries between us seem to melt away, lost in the heat of his stare and the words left unspoken. With each passing hour, those invisible lines grew fainter, less important. The rush, the allure, the challenge, it was as though I were walking on a razor's edge, getting closer to something inevitable, something too tempting to resist. As night fell, the sounds of the bayou outside seemed to join in the tension between us, creating a symphony of its own, mirroring our unspoken desires. We didn't say much, but the language of our bodies, the stolen glances, and accidental touches spoke volumes. "Let's share a drink," Jack suggested, his voice low and enticing. I nodded and poured us each a glass of bourbon. The amber liquid shimmered in the dim light, reflecting the sunset just outside, like the emotions flickering between us, intense, bold, and undeniable. We sat too close, the space between us practically non-existent. Our knees almost touched, the warmth from his body seeping into mine, as the bourbon slid smoothly down our throats, igniting a warmth that spread through us both, loosening our tongues and opening our hearts. Jack leaned in, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "You know," he began, his gaze locking with mine, "I've never felt like this with anyone my age. There's something different about you." His confession hung in the air, suspended in a moment that seemed to freeze time. My heart raced, a mix of excitement and fear flooding my veins. I truly saw him then, not as the boy I once knew, but as the man he had become, fierce, mesmerizing, and completely irresistible. The air between us was thick with the rich scent of bourbon and the intoxicating musk of desire. I could feel the warmth of his body, an undeniable pull that seemed to draw me closer with every breath I took. Our words melted into whispers, and those whispers dissolved into a heavy silence, only broken by the sound of our breaths coming in sync. His hand found mine, fingers weaving together in a simple yet electrifying gesture that spoke more than words ever could. I leaned in closer, my lips brushing near his ear, the space between us charged with an undeniable energy. In that moment, I cared only for the sensation, for the electricity that danced between us. Then, as if the universe itself held its breath, his lips gently grazed mine, not in a kiss, but as a promise, a teasing taste of what could be. The sensation lingered, pulling me deeper into the intimacy we were creating, a longing that swirled in the air, thick and heavy with anticipation. We pulled back, our eyes locking, the unspoken tension hanging between us, thick and intoxicating. My heart raced, and my breath caught in my chest as I could feel every inch of my body alive, responding to him, to the touch, to the way we moved together. The room was heavy with the scent of us, the shared hunger and the subtle heat that rose from our proximity, drawing us even closer, as if the space between us no longer existed. Every nerve in my body tingled, awakening to the raw, electric intimacy between us. It wasn't just the kiss that changed everything, it was the deep connection, the intensity of what we were becoming in that moment, a quiet explosion of desire that would forever alter the way we saw each other. When he leaned in, our lips met in a gentle kiss, filled with unspoken anticipation. It wasn't a rushed kiss, but one of deep connection, as if time itself paused in that moment. Our breaths intertwined, his hand lightly threading through my hair, pulling me closer, allowing me to feel the warmth and closeness of his body. This kiss felt like a promise, unspoken but full of attachment and yearning. I could sense the strength in his every movement, the tenderness yet intensity in how he approached me. Everything around us seemed to fade, leaving only the sensation of his lips on mine, like a shared heartbeat, an undeniable bond. In that moment, it felt as if the world no longer mattered, only the presence of each other in that space. Our bodies were drawn together, the heat between us radiating outward, making the air around us feel thick and almost unbearable. Each breath I took felt more shallow, as though the intensity of the moment was consuming me. Every inch of my skin seemed to stir to life under Jack's soft, deliberate touches, each one igniting a spark that sent a wave of warmth coursing through me. My body responded instinctively, trembling slightly at the gentle pressure of his fingers, the way he pulled me closer, as though he couldn't get enough of me. We didn't speak, there were no words, only the quiet communication between our touch, the unspoken yearning that was impossible to ignore. My heart raced, the thudding sound of it pounding in my chest felt like it was echoing in the stillness. It was as if the world outside no longer existed. We moved toward the bedroom, both of us acutely aware of each step, each shift of our bodies. Every movement was a promise, a signal that we were on the verge of something beyond words, something that had been building, unspoken, for far too long. I could feel the tension in the air, a palpable force that seemed to envelop us, the steady beat of our hearts becoming louder, synchronized. The closeness between us was overwhelming, intoxicating. My mind was swirling with emotions, part of me wondering if this was real, if I could trust the desire that was flooding me. But as we crossed into the bedroom, that doubt melted away, replaced by an urgency that I could not ignore. The space around us seemed to shrink, and all that mattered was the connection between us, the way he held me, the way he made me feel seen, desired, wanted in a way I hadn't felt in years. As the bedroom door closed, the storm of love rushed in. The passion reached its peak. Jack's hands confidently and boldly slid under the hem of my skirt. His touches were like electric shocks that made me shiver. I responded with loving caresses towards him. His stimulation created its own rhythm. Our two bodies moved in sync with each touch and each kiss. His youthfulness made my emotions increase to the peak. As we drew closer, a deep and sweet feeling enveloped the air, like an adventure we had never dared to experience before. Everything around us seemed to fade away, leaving only this moment, where we let go and allowed our emotions and desires to be free. It wasn't just the harmony of our bodies, but a deeper connection of our souls. We experienced a release, a quiet sharing without words. Afterward, as we lay together, the cool night air returned, gently contrasting with the warmth we had just shared. Our breaths gradually steadied, and in the silence, there was no regret, only the comfort of having shared something truly special. The echo of our heartbeats lingered, reminding us of the bond we had just forged, a connection that felt undeniable. As the morning light filtered softly through the curtains, we woke, feeling the warmth of each other's presence, and I realized that this moment had been inevitable, as if it had been written in the stars.